So when they take the silver dollar, they got to go around different banks and cash it in.
Former Kansas City Police Department intelligence detective and now attorney Gary Jenkins produced 4 documentary films, most recently Gangland Wire, creator of smartphone app entitled Kansas City Mob Tours. Download it now. If you like what you hear, go to ganglandwire.com. Navigate to the shop page. We need you to put a hit out on our donate button. Gangland Wire True Crime Stories is produced at the Big Dumb Fun Show Studio 4. And now, here's Gary Jenkins.
Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the studio of the Big Dumb Fun Show, Studio 4, right here in the classic old Ice House building in Midtown, Kansas City. I'm here with my good friend and co-host, Aaron. Say hello, Aaron.
Hello, Aaron.
Well, we've got a barn burner for you tonight, folks. We are sitting here with my good friend, Troy Cole, retired Sergeant Troy Cole from the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department. And he once had the distinctive or dubious or I'm not sure what kind of honor or horrific or whatever assignment of overseeing the investigation of serial killer Bob Berdella here in Kansas City. Troy, say hello to everybody.
Hello, everybody.
Troy, tell our listeners a little bit about your law enforcement career. You have kind of an interesting pre-KCPD story. Just brush over that and then come on to the KCPD.
Well, 1968, I moved to Washington, D.C., went to work for the Central Intelligence Agency, stayed there for a couple years, didn't really care for it. It was not too exciting job, and they were hiring a lot of police officers for the Washington, D.C. Police Department at that time. So in 1970, I joined the Washington, D.C. Police Department. I did 2 years there and then moved to Kansas City and started my Kansas City career in January of 1972.
Wow, that's interesting. And another little known fact about Troy, he was quite a baseball player when he was young. He developed a knuckleball, I understand, that might have got him into the major leagues except for a little minor thing called arm injury. Is that correct, Troy?
In my dreams, I got to the major leagues.
Well, you played in a semi-pro or something, didn't you?
Yeah, I played some college ball.
In a quadruple A or?
A little semi-pro ball.
All right.
Did you get into a farm team?
You got a lot closer than I did.
But no, only in my dreams did I see the major leagues. But
a question I often ask other men, how old were you when you realized you were never going to be a major league baseball player? See, I was about 12 years old when I realized. You probably were like 17 or 18 before you realized you weren't ever going to make the major leagues. How old were you?
Actually, I was hanging on to that dream until I was a sophomore in college.
College, okay. Well,
it took me a while to catch on.
Aaron, what about you? How old were you when you realized you were never going to be a professional athlete?
You know, it was somewhere between Harney Little League and the next step up when all the bigger guys.
Yes, exactly.
That hit puberty and sprouted up were bigger and stronger and faster. I was throwing some mean pitches at those little leaguers, but I couldn't keep up with them, and they were just knocking them out of the park on me.
That happens to almost all of us sooner or later, doesn't it?
Yeah, reality finally hits.
Reality hits.
Now, was it a college scholarship to play baseball?
Yes, it was a junior college that I attended in Muskogee, Oklahoma, Bacone Junior College at that time. It's a 4-year school now, but JUCO at that time.
Are you from Oklahoma? Or
yes, born and raised in a small town called Kyoto, Oklahoma.
Okay.
Southeastern part. Most people never heard of it. So town of about 900 people.
So you were right next to the Arkansas border along there.
About 35 miles. I played 3 years in Arkansas.
I was thinking
American Legion ball.
You played in
Fort
Arkansas.
Smith, Arkansas. And it was, 35, 40 miles.
And then you go to junior college and you studied criminology?
I studied baseball.
Baseball, girls, and beer.
And went right to work for the CIA?
Yeah, it was kind of a bizarre.
That's a good baseball program.
Yeah, it was a great baseball program. But no,
like Mo Greenberg, wasn't it? Mo Greenberg was a spy.
Yeah.
We're looking for some Iowa Americans. How about on the baseball field?
Shoot. No, I'm not sure how that came about. Most people, I don't think, even believe the story when I tell it. I was working construction for my brother. He owned a small plumbing company in Grandview, and went to work for him after I realized that my arm was no longer going to get me to the major leagues. So I moved to Kansas City and went to work for him. And living in an apartment in Grandview, knock on the door one night, was a CIA recruiter. Came in, gave me a spiel about going to work for the CIA. I'm not sure I even knew what the CIA stood for at that time. But anyway.
But they were going door to door.
Offered me a job. Yeah, they were hard up.
They are
really
not doing that in Grandview today.
But
No, they're not.
Anyway, he said, think about it. And so I did. And about a month later, I moved to Washington, D.C., and the rest was history.
Well, interesting. We should do a whole show on Troy's CIA career and running around spying on people and probably how he was trained to kill people with his little fingers. And
yeah, it was, the only thing good out of that job, I did get to work in the White House for a year or almost a year, about 10 months, I think it was. And that was kind of exciting, but
you can't talk about what you were doing.
Oh, well, you wouldn't want to hear it anyway.
You pushed a lot of paper. I got the feeling. Pushed a lot of paper from one place to the other.
That's just exactly right.
I mean, it was a different time, 1968, 1969.
Yeah, Richard Nixon was in office, so it was a different time.
No wonder you can't talk about what you were doing.
Hey, were you part of the plumbers?
You said you worked for your
You're
brother.
the one that got away, huh?
Yeah, I slept in Watergate Hotel. So,
but then you transferred over to the local Washington, D.C. Police Department.
Yeah, D.C. was in a process of hiring and increasing the size of their department. They went from a 3,600-man department to 5,100 in the period of about 6 months.
Oh my God!
And they were hiring guys right and left, and a lot of Vietnam vets were getting out of Vietnam, and they were hiring them. And anyway, I became part of that increase and stayed there until, like I said, January 72. I came back to Kansas City on vacation in late 71 and had two brothers that lived here, and they said, "Man, you should move back here and join the KCPD." And I did, to make a long story short. So started here in January of 72.
I'm glad you did. I'm
glad I did too.
That's almost the same era that Gary Jenkins started.
Yeah, I came on in 1971.
Yeah.
We had a big push. Only our big push was to hire 350 more officers, not 3,000, 2,000 more officers.
Yeah, we went from 3,600 to 5,100 in a short period of time. But that was during all the protests for the Vietnam War. And a lot of overtime and
a lot going on.
A lot was going on in
DC.
Washington, D.C. at that time. Yeah, everybody wanted to come there and do their things. So.
And protest.
Yeah.
And that really, I can see how they would need more officers. And you were just a uniformed patrolman at that point?
Yes, I worked out of the 10th precinct there while I was there.
And when you moved to Kansas City, were you in Central Patrol or? Graduated
from the academy, and I went to work at the 63rd Street station, they called it then. It was 63rd and Brookside. There was a police station, and that's where I worked until I went into the detective division.
Yeah, now called Metro Patrol.
Right, it's now Metro.
Yeah, you were a station detective at start, worked burglaries and larcenies and crimes like that, if I remember right.
Yeah, they started a new unit out there, and I think that was 73 or 74.
Something like that, because we did the same thing up at Central Patrol, and I worked same kind of a unit up there.
Yeah, we called it a burglary unit, but we worked larcenies and pretty much any kind of property crime.
Did you ever have any calls from Vern Miller's house?
No, I didn't get that.
6612 Edgevale Road. It was in Metro. We just talked about that, about haunted houses that have connections to crimes. Vern Miller, after they did the Union Station massacre, he had been living there, and the house is still out there today. He and Adam Ricchetti and Pretty Boy Floyd, if you believe the official reports, all ran back to that house and then scattered from there. And their ghosts are still there. The guy that lived there for a while said that the attic light would not shut off. He'd shut it off, but he'd come back home, it was turned on. And the attic door, he'd close it. When he'd come back, it would be open, or vice versa. I think he would close and it would be open when he came back. So, and finally they had a preacher come in and bless it, and
everything's okay.
Everything's okay now. Okay. He was able to sell it then.
Yeah, then he could get it sold.
Then he could get it sold. Anyhow, so let's moving right along. In March of 1988, you were assigned to the Kansas City Police Homicide Unit.
I was.
as a sergeant over the, you had a squad, a particular squad. Did they have a call-out squad then?
The 1010 squad.
The 1010 squad.
Yeah, we had 3 squads at that time. We had the 1010, the 1020, and the 1030. And then we built in what we called a murder squad.
Murder squad, that's what I was thinking of. Right?
Now, was 1010 as a murder?
No, 1010 was just, it was a squad of, I think there was 9 detectives in each squad. And again, you had a sergeant in charge of each of the 3. Mine just happened to be the 1010 squad.
So that was the radio numbers, wasn't it? Based on the radio numbers,
it was,
right?
Right.
And then the murder squad would have been separate from the
murder
other
squad
3.
was formed basically to be called out on any whodunit. It was concept of Gary Van Buskirk's at that time.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. And he would you would go out and handle any whodunit. We called it a whodunit.
Right.
If it wasn't a husband killing a wife or whatever, if it appeared that it was going to take some time and effort, then the murder squad would get called in, and no matter what time of day or night it was, instead of the squad that was on duty, the murder squad would pick it up.
A lot of overtime there, wasn't there?
A lot of overtime, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
And there's a new term for your glossary, a whodunit. A whodunit. That means it wasn't a husband, wife, or
and the boyfriend didn't kill the girlfriend.
Boyfriend didn't kill the girlfriend, or they didn't catch the person right there. If you got an unknown suspect
and a dead body,
it's a whodunit.
Now,
a stone whodunit, and sometimes they're kind of hard to solve.
Did you ever get called on a whodunit and it just turned out the person had died of natural causes?
Probably, although I can't recall one off the top of my head, but more than likely we have. Yeah, we. Over the course of a few years up there, you saw a little bit of everything. So
sometimes they'd want to clear a murder, and they'd say, "Well, that was a suicide, man. Can't you tell he was shot in the back with some arrows? Get another clearance."
Well, and we're talking about like this, so this would be like 1988. Now, Kansas City is one of the top murder cities in the U.S. now. What was it like in 1988?
Worse.
Yeah,
1988. The years I was up there. Well, the second go-around, I was up there as a detective in the late 70s, and then in the 80s, I went back as a sergeant. We were averaging probably we probably averaged 125, 130 murders a year.
Oh, wow. That's much more than we are today.
Much more.
We're running around 100 or maybe even less than 100 once in a while.
Right. They had, I think it was 1992. It was either 92 or 93. The all-time record was set, 153.
Wow, I'd forgotten
So, yeah, people think now there's a lot of murders, but...
I think there's just more publicity today than there was back then, don't you?
Mm-hmm. Because we definitely had more murders.
And we had interviewed a couple of other officers, David Starbuck.
Right, David Barton on the Jamaicans.
About the Jamaican and some of the drug gangs and that stuff that was in and around that area. Did you find that maybe there was a lot of those homicides were related?
There was, there was quite a few. I don't know what percentage it would be, but there was a lot of Jamaican-related narcotic
plus a crack cocaine epidemic at that time. That was huge.
Yeah. Well, the mafia even added to it.
We still had a few whodunits by the mob, didn't we?
Had a few mob killings at that time, too.
That was the end of those mob killings, though. When's the last time you heard of a mob murder? Anywhere.
Well,
not even just Kansas City.
I would assume there's got to be some Chicago, New York. I mean,
I'm kind of tapped into all those different mob fan base and Facebook pages, and they don't have many.
Really?
No, they don't have many. We haven't had one in Kansas City. I wonder who the last mob murderer was. Oh, I know who it was. It was that Harold dude. Harold, was it Ash? Guy that came home from the casino.
Yeah.
He, I don't know if that ever came out in the paper, but that was definitely, there's no doubt in my mind that was a mob-related mob murder. But I don't want to talk about that because the suspect's still out there.
Had he won some money that night or something?
I don't think so.
No.
I don't think it was for money. Yeah, I don't think it was for money. I don't know. I may be wrong. But
well, that's an awful lot of murders for essentially 9 guys to.
Well, that's one squad. There was three squads of. I think there was probably around 33, 34 homicide detectives in the unit. So 9 or 10. I may be 1 or 2 off, but 9 or 10 in each squad. And then again, you had
3 squads.
We had 3 squads. So
And then you were, so I mean, because you're looking at I'm just looking at your numbers where you're talking about 125, 130 murders in a year. That's like one every 3 days.
Seemed like more than that.
I bet. As often as you were called on duty, it was probably not during convenient business hours.
No, most of them obviously don't occur in prime time. So you get a lot of wake up calls at 2 a.m. and hey, could you get your squad and meet me at such and such? So yeah, there's a lot of that.
This particular case we're going to talk about, I think you got called out or you were already working, but you ended up working Easter weekend and missing some basketball games, if I remember your book right.
I did. That case started on April 2nd. It was a Saturday, and it was the day before Easter.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I remember reading that out of the book. By the way,
what is the name of the book?
The book is Rites of Burial by Troy Cole and Tom Jackman. You can get it off of Amazon.com, I believe. Is there any other places that have it? Barnes & Noble?
Kindle.
It's a Kindle book.
So you have it as a Kindle or an electronic book that people can get?
Download it. And I don't think there's any other places. You or Tom don't have a website where you can order off of it. There's some people you can order the book and get an autographed copy off the website.
No, but the only thing you can find now is the used copies or the Kindle.
Okay.
So,
now, Rites of Burial, this is the book that you wrote about Bob Berdella?
Yes.
Which seems, I mean, so you're essentially the sergeant over 33 other officers, detectives, right, working across the entire metro on murder cases, where it's, like I said, one every 3 days. And with Bob Berdella, they didn't really ever find much for bodies. And it wasn't, it was an obvious murdered body that they got a call on. Instead, some guy escapes from Bob's
this
house.
doesn't start out as a murder case, did it?
Not at all.
No.
I mean,
he was trying to get out of it. He was trying to go home.
I did my best.
You're like, is the guy dead? No? Okay, we'll call somebody else.
Yeah. Call sex crimes. It sounds like a sex crime to me, and that's what you did.
Call Roy Orth. He's a man.
Roy Orth. He's a sergeant. Ashley Hearn. Send them out.
Right, we got to talk to Roy then sometime.
Yeah.
Well, tell a little bit about the events that started this investigation. I'll tell you right now, folks, that a man jumped out of an upper story window of a house here in Midtown Kansas City wearing only a dog collar with a leash on it. His name was Christopher Bryson. And he ran to a neighbor's house, I believe, and they called the police. And so an officer, Larry Lewis and Lloyd Harvey, made the call. Can you talk about what you first learned from the officers at the scene? They called you for some reason.
I was working that day. I was working the day shift, and on weekends you have one sergeant that covers homicide, robbery, and sex crimes. So I happened to be the man that day, and the dispatcher called and said, "We've got a naked white male wearing a dog collar, and he claims that he's been tortured and he just escaped by jumping out a third floor window." So he said, "Wonder if you could send some detectives out." So Ashley Hearn happened to be working that day, and I think Darwin Dupree, was also
I believe
working.
he was. You're right.
So I had the two of them go out, told them to go out and do a quick interview and see if it was worthy of having detective crew to come out. So they went out, and Ashley called me a few minutes later after he got to the scene and had done a brief interview with Chris Bryson. And he said, "Sergeant, it looks like there might be something to this. He's got some injuries, and he claims that he's been held captive for about 4 to 5 days."
Yeah, because you never know in these kinds of cases, these sex cases, you never know whether this person making the complaint is just making the complaint because they're mad at their lover or what the deal is, or they just want to get back at somebody. So
which was my first thought.
Right. That's always your first thought
right.
in that kind of a deal. I hate to seem not prejudiced, but
there've been other calls of similar nature where there's a naked man running through the neighborhood and with a dog collar on.
Well, I have had calls with a naked man running through the neighborhood. I have had
maybe
that.
Maybe not wearing a dog collar.
It wasn't your first naked man call, is what you're saying.
No. But
and your experience kicks in.
But he did claim he had been held captive for about 5 days, so that that added a little bit to the intrigue.
Plus the injuries, having the visible injuries.
Yes, he did have injuries. Had injuries to his mouth and ankles and wrists, and it was evident that he had probably been tied up at some point, as he claimed. But anyway, I had Ashley and Darwin go out, and again they called back and they said it looks like there might be something to it. So after he gave me a brief rundown, I said, "Well, let's have let's have the uniformed guys keep an eye on the house, and we'll get a search warrant and go in and see if we can substantiate his claim. And so at that point, the Ashley came back down and started preparing a search warrant to go in, and uniformed officers, Cindy Cherry, I can't remember who else was out there.
And Lloyd Harvey.
Lloyd Harvey, yeah.
Cindy Cherry. They were watching the house.
And while they were watching,
this was Bob Berdella's house. Christopher Bryson had pointed out the house and said it was that house there, and that man named Bob Berdella is the one that was holding me.
He didn't know it was Bob Berdella.
Oh, he didn't know his name?
The guy's name was Bob.
Bob, okay.
Yeah, he was a total stranger to him. He had been picked up 4 or 5 days before, and the guy introduced himself as Bob.
Okay.
And he took him to the house, and the house happened to be 4315 Charlotte Street.
You'll never forget that address, will you, Troy?
I never will. But anyway, while they're watching the house, the uniformed people are watching the house, and Ashley is doing preparation for a search warrant. Bob Berdella happens to drive up, and he approaches the uniformed officers, and he says, "What's going on here?" And they said, "Well, who are you?" And he said, "Well, I'm Bob Berdella, and that's my house." So at that point, they placed him under arrest for investigation of sodomy based on the story that Chris Bryson had given. And they called me again and said, we got him in custody. And I said, we'll bring him down to the second floor and we'll get him booked in. So they brought him down to the second floor, and Ashley tried to get him to see if he wanted to. He advised him of his rights and asked him if he wanted to discuss the case. And he told him basically what the allegation was against him. And he said, "No, I don't have anything to say." So he brought him over to my office, and I approached him and told him we're in the process of getting a search warrant for your house based on the allegations. And do you want to sign a consent to search? And he said no, he didn't. And so I booked him in, signed a may-I, as we called it back then, and booked him into the jail. And
what's that mean?
A may-I is I guess that's a term that probably got started when a uniformed officer brings an arrest down to the second floor. You have to have an investigation sergeant's approval to
actually
approve
book him
the
in.
actual arrest, to book him into the city jail. And so it's like, Sergeant, may I book this guy? And I assume that's where the term came
has
from.
To be, yeah.
I really don't know, but I just made that up, but it sounds good.
No, I'm sure it was.
Was a charge placed at that point?
Yes, we booked him in on a charge of sodomy at that point, based on Chris's story. And,
did you still have Chris in custody? You didn't really hold him in custody, but...
He wasn't in custody. We took him to the hospital for treatment.
Okay.
So, yeah, and actually would have been forcible sodomy, I guess.
Yes.
Want to alienate our fans out here that say, well, you can't arrest somebody just for sodomy. I've done sodomy many times.
There you go.
But you can't force somebody into that situation, correct?
I know I felt like I've been sodomized before, but I don't think there was actually anything involved physically.
That's only your boss over there where you work. We've all felt that, haven't we, Troy?
That's right.
Now, so there you are sitting across the desk from Bob Berdella. Pretty cool character, because he had been I was doing some background research there. He was like a neighborhood watch guy. Yeah,
he was the block watch captain for his home association.
Right, Hyde Park Home Association.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He was a mover and a shaker.
He
in
had
Hyde
contact
Park
with the police department from time to time, and they would go out and do their interviews, and so yeah, he was a pillar of the community.
Did you get any kind of a vibe or feel from him, Troy, sitting there? I mean, you didn't know anything about him other than just sitting there.
I was only with him briefly.
So, okay.
I talked to him maybe 3 minutes, and he was nervous. He was extremely nervous. Matter of fact, he was physically shaking.
So you knew there was something more to this. You knew something was wrong. Your instincts had to be screaming.
But I still thought it was probably a lover's quarrel gone bad.
Yeah, that's your automatic.
That was my first thought, yeah.
Yeah, we've all made those calls late at night. I've made 3 or 4 of them that I can remember distinctly. A younger kid, like 20, 19, 18, and an older man. And the older man's complaining the kid's stolen something from him, or the kid's doing something wrong, took his car, but then brought it back, or, some crap like that. And so you know what's going on.
They don't really know each other.
But yet they do. And, there's just something weird going on. And it's always, they get these young kids. We're going to try to go into that and talk a little bit more about the fruit hustling chicken hawk kind of subculture, but we'll do that later on. Let's talk a little more about when did they first find the kind of damning evidence? They went in the house with a search warrant. Did you go out on that search warrant?
Can I ask this?
Yeah.
Because I want to say lead into that. So you only really had 3 minutes in your office, if you will, with Bob. They ask you the may I, you say yes, you place a charge against him. Can they hold him for 72 hours
20
with the
hours.
charge?
In the state of Missouri at that time, and I think it's still that way.
I think it still
You have a
is.
20-hour hold, so you have to file state charges within 20 hours or release him.
And how long would it take for them to then process an actual search warrant to get it to be able to legally walk into his place?
Oh, I think it probably took on the average of a couple of hours for a search warrant, probably.
So Bob, basically you book him in, you've got him in custody with the tentative charge, and then they give you the search warrant a couple hours later. And did you send Ashley and Harvey over?
No, I went out along with Chris Malstead was a detective that I took with me, and then Ashley was out there. There were several. You had crime scene investigators. You had commanders. There was probably, I don't know, a dozen people at the time we executed the search warrant.
Would that be normal? Like that normal amount of people would be there to execute a search warrant? On
most search warrants, it's handled by the tax squad, I think.
Right.
But this was a little bit different. We didn't call in the tax squad. We didn't feel the need for it. It wasn't like we had a threat on the other side of the door. It was probably going to be going into an empty house looking for evidence versus going in for a bad guy.
Somehow the word was getting around. This was a little bit different sort of a case already, wasn't it? Sounds to me like you had commanders coming out there wanting to see what was going on.
Some people were starting to get pretty excited about it. I wasn't one of them.
This wasn't just a fruit hustler, maybe. You didn't know, but I mean, so you go up to the door, right? Would you say it was
4315 Charlotte.
And the door's locked, obviously, but the third floor window's open.
Yes.
How'd you guys go in the building?
We kicked the front door open. A side note to that is when I got out to the scene, I saw animal control. They had a truck parked there, and I said, "What do we need animal control for?" Well, some of the neighbors had contacted them and said this guy's got some huge chow dogs on the inside, and they probably are vicious. So they had called animal control come out. So animal control was basically the first people that went in the house and corralled the dogs.
Send them in first.
Yeah, let them get bit first.
You kick the door in, and then you send them in.
Yeah,
that's exactly what you do.
All they've got is like a net.
If you're smart, that's what you do.
You get your big guy to go up there and kick the door, and then you all jump back and say, "Okay, animal control, run on in there, sick them," and they do it, don't they?
Yeah, that's right.
And you're like, well, they know there must be some animal in there. The guy was wearing a dog collar.
Yeah, in fact, he did have. He had 2 or 3 chow dogs. I don't remember which. One of them was huge. Looked like a lion.
I remember that.
Huge.
We're ready.
Well, we could. I think we're at a really good point here when we kind of talk into entering the house and how that's going to go out as a good lead out to make people have to come back and listen to the next episode.
To what they find inside the house.
Yeah.
So
besides chow dogs,
yeah.
You mean they were like chihuahuas? When you say chow dog, I'm thinking like a little,
Chow.
They're huge, big red dogs.
Big red dogs.
Oh, okay.
They were bred to be guard dogs in China, I believe.
Uh-huh.
And chows are noted to be vicious.
Pretty mean.
They're not a really popular breed right now, doesn't seem like. But
they weren't very hungry.
They have black tongues. That's
really?
one thing that stands out about them, yeah. The only reason I know that, my neighbor had one, and they got a black tongue.
They weren't very hungry that day. They'd been feasting.
They might already had.
Had some food. We'll get on into that later.
That's a gallow humor.
What you find, gallows humor. What you find inside. This is Saturday night before Easter Sunday.
Correct.
And you were already wanting to get home to watch some basketball, and here you are inside or going inside this crappy-looking, smelly house. You could probably tell the smell of it. You probably could tell just when the door cracked open, you did not want to go in there and search around.
No.
I got a feeling.
It was cluttered from floor to ceiling. Well, that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but it was an extremely cluttered house. It stunk to high heaven.
Oh, that's horrid. That's horrid. I've been there.
Dog feces everywhere, been tracked around, and there was a big old pot in the kitchen on the stove that had a turkey carcass, and it had been there for a few days. It had a terrific smell to it. So, all the combined odors. It was a pretty tough go.
I met animal control once in an apartment building there on Linwood, and they had a crazy cat woman that they were scared of her, and they wanted some backup. So we went down there, and as we started down the hallway, I started gagging, and I threw up. Yeah. It was that bad, and the animal control guy says, "Okay, so you guys just wait right here, and let me see how it is." And pretty soon he looked down, he said, "We're okay." He said, "Just stay out there, but we're okay, and you don't need to come in." I said, "Thank you, Jesus." I did. It was, oh my God.
It's terrible. Yeah.
Ooh.
This was just, he had just filth. The house obviously hadn't been cleaned in forever, so.
Bless the dogs.
Yeah.
Bless the food. Bless the other things. Okay. Ready to wind this down now, Aaron, and we'll come back in the next episode and talk about what they found inside this Robert Berdella's house.
And we're talking with Troy Cole, who was the sergeant for the what would you call it, the murder squad?
I was just one of the sergeants in the homicide unit. I had the homicide unit. I had the 1010 squad, to be exact.
And actually what will happen here, he will end up being the sergeant in charge of the Berdella squad. He actually ended up with the Berdella squad.
That happens a couple of days later, yeah.
Luck of the draw, you happen to be at the desk, the phone rings, bing, bang, boom. Next thing you know, Bob's in front of you. And then he's incarcerated, and you guys are at the front door. The animal control goes in, they clear the animals, and then there you are.
Correct.
You don't even know what's going to happen, really. What you're not expecting what happens to happen, I would imagine, but we're going to save that.
Okay.
For the next episode. All right?
If you've got a drug or alcohol problem,
call First Call. Make your first call to First Call. This is a nonprofit I have long supported. Call 816-361-5900, or if you're outside the area and you just want to find out local resources, go to their website, www.firstcallkc.org, or call that number. It's a 24-hour-a-day answered hotline, and I'm sure they can steer you to services in your area, or they will make arrangements for something for you that night here in Kansas City, or maybe the next morning.
And remember to download the Kansas City Mob Tour app. You can take your own personal tour of notorious mob locations in and around Kansas City, including the Trap, including Union Station, and maybe pretty soon, Vern Miller's home.
6612 Edgevale, or Edgewood, no, Edgevale.
And then listen to Gangland Wire, the podcast, while you're driving around at places like Union Station, and you've got to rent the movie or buy it that started it all. Gangland Wire, available on Amazon for rent or for purchase. And remember, folks, we're not doing this for free.
Oh, yeah, you're getting it for free, but well, maybe you're not going to get this one for free. Make a donation, please. Make a donation. Help us out.
We hate to have to say this, folks, but it does cost money for Freedom of Information Act requests and water.
And plus, we had to pay Troy.
A lot.
A lot.
So just go to ganglandwire.com and put a hit out on our donate button.
One thing we forgot in our last minute little ad there, it's by the book Rites of Burial by Troy Cole and Tom Jackman. You can find it on Amazon. All right. Say goodnight, Aaron.
Good night, Aaron.
Good night, Troy.
Good night.
Music provided by Odd-O-Matic. Stock them online at Odd-O-Matic Music.